Well, good morning. Everybody's having a good day, I guess. Hope. I'm going to start off with a statement, and I'm going to let you fill in the blank. The old saying is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. College professors sometimes don't like that statement because you're in the who you know business while you're here with us, and or the what you know, and you better make sure you know. But the who you know side is actually very important. I've never regarded myself as necessarily a networking expert, and I did ask Jim to be ready to share some wisdom today because Jim's had extensive experience in that area, and I think what he has to say will be useful for everybody as well. But when I started thinking about my career, I started thinking about places that I've worked and jobs that I've had, and what I very quickly realized is that networking has been a huge part of just about everything I've done, and I didn't even necessarily realize it at the time. And I thought, to begin, I just walk through a few minutes of that, a few things that have gone on with me. 1982, I was in high school, and I was ready to get a part-time job, and so I went to work and found out that Jim and I, he had essentially the same high school job that I did, and we lived in the same town. But I went to work at a place called Crest, and I was a stock boy. I unloaded trucks, and I put things on the floor, and I cleaned up the place, and all those kinds of things. But the manager of that store had been at Harding when my dad was at Harding, and the two of them were friends, both members of the church. He didn't attend the same congregation we did, but there was a connection, and it helped me get that job. Move forward to 1987. I'm about to start my senior year. And what do you start thinking about when you're a senior in college? What should you be thinking about? I'm almost done, and it's time to go start using all of this and to earn a living. I mean, you start thinking about those things, and so I'm wondering what's going to happen. And I've also, I went to Lipscomb, and so as I was going through college, I thought I'll work in Nashville because I'm a business major, and Lipscomb's business department, it's always had this stellar reputation. People in Nashville love it, and just the fact that you walk into an interview and you went there, they know there's some ethics and some integrity, and everybody comes to campus to interview. And so my thought all along had been, the job part probably won't be that difficult. Well, then in 1987, before my senior year, I started dating this girl in Atlanta, and she already had a job. And there really wasn't any sense in two people looking for a job in Nashville when one person already had a job in Atlanta. So as we realized we were going to get married, it changed things for me. We got engaged in February, and so then I'm thinking, all right, I've got to start thinking about how to go to work in Atlanta when I get out of school, and I don't know how that's going to work. Well, we went into class one day, and the head of the accounting department, he stood up and he said, I got a message from one of our graduates. He works in Atlanta, and he said that if there's anybody that's going to graduate that's going to head that direction, bring your resume to me, and I'll send it to him, and he'll walk it in to the Human Resources Department of the corporation. And I did that. And I'm thankful that I had enough of a relationship with the head of our accounting department that when he got my resume, he didn't just forget about it. He thought enough of me to go ahead and send it on. Worked out very well. We were on quarters there, and so on spring break, I interviewed. About 2 weeks later, just as the spring, my last quarter of school starts, I got an offer letter, and so school ended up it was coasting because I knew where I was going to go. You graduate June 4th, you get married June 25th, and July 11th you go to work. My wife started talking in 1994, 95 about moving home. This is her home. She's from North Alabama. And I liked my work in Atlanta. I'd been treated well. I didn't know anybody over here, or very few people over here. And so I put her off when she started talking about moving. And so finally, I said, well, I'll send out some resumes. Sometimes you do things and you can take some action. You feel like you're probably dealing with the request, but maybe nothing will come of it. And so I sent some resumes over here, and it led to one interview. But when I finally realized that that's what she really wanted and that it would be best for our family, I sent a letter. There was a man working here named Vernon Shuffett. Some of you may know Vernon, some of you won't. But Vernon was an elder in the church in southern Illinois, and he was an elder where my dad was preaching. I was pretty young at the time. He was a CPA, sold his CPA practice, and he wanted to do mission work. And he enrolled here as a student, just like many of you all are now. And his intention was, I'm going to prepare myself for missionary work, and then I'm going to go somewhere in the mission field, and that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my career. Well, things changed, because as he finished his work here, Brother Coyle and others in leadership convinced him that he could do an excellent work with our school, because our school needed somebody with his accounting abilities to do that kind of work. And so he stayed, and he blessed our school in a major way. Well, I wrote to him, not asking for a job, but I wrote to him for leads. My letter was, we're talking about moving over. You're well connected here. Are there businesses in this area where you would suggest that I would try to make contact in looking for a job? And so Brother Shuffett, he writes me back, and he gives me some ideas and some suggestions, and I send out some resumes. But about a month later, I get another letter, and he says, I'm going to retire at some point, and I'm going to need somebody to come along behind me and do this work here, and would you have some interest in talking to us about working with the school? And it changed the rest of our lives in a major way. Never could have imagined. But again, there was a relationship. And so in all those cases, there was networking involved. And there were college jobs that involved networking. There have been a couple of jobs where I really went and got those cold. What do networks do when they're working correctly?
They advance.
Do what?
They advance.
Okay. What does a computer network do when it's working properly?
Communicate.
It connects people. What business are you going into? You're trying to connect people to Jesus ultimately, aren't you? I mean, that's what you're here to prepare yourself to do, whether it's through preaching or teaching or being the mission field. I mean, it's an area of ministry, and so you're going to be in the business of connecting people, but you're also going to be in business for you, as we call it self-employed. And so I just want to try to make the idea, put it in front of you, that the better you are with networking, the more successful you can be in ministry. Which connections are going to bless you most in your career?
Lifelong.
Lifelong, okay. That's a good answer.
You don't really know.
I think that's the best answer. Do you really know? I mean, the lifelong ones you hope, but you really don't know. And what does that mean?
Just take as many as you can.
It means to make as many as you can, but not only that, it really means that since you don't know where that connection is going to come from, every relationship and every person you meet, you ought to treat that person and that relationship with the respect that it really deserves. Because there are no unimportant relationships, especially in ministry. So many times, we try to say, you don't know what day on this campus you might meet your next set of elders. Is the set of elders that you're going to go to work with. Could happen. How are you going to be remembered here? By your faculty, by your staff, by the president? And whose responsibility is it to make sure you're remembered well? President Jones is the face of the university. President Jones gets calls just about on a daily basis, either from a church that's looking for a preacher, or that he may get a call, or the dean may get a call saying, well, we're talking to this guy, what can you tell us about him? And of course, we've got laws that we have to respect, privacy laws, so sometimes we're limited in what we can say. But what we want to be able to do every time is to say great things about you. That's what we always want to be able to do. We want to fulfill the law. We want to be within the last thing you should want is for somebody to call President Jones and him to have to say, well, Jim Collins, I'm not sure, I don't remember him. I need to find, or he wouldn't say it that way, but if he has to come and find out about you, that's a bad thing. sometimes we look at some disadvantages of being a small school, but there are these great advantages. You should be able to have a great relationship with our president. And you should be able to know him, and he should be able to know great things about you because we're a small school. It's a blessing, especially for campus students. I mean, you've just got all these great advantages, and the question is, will you take care of them? I knew of a young man that was at a small school, and when it came time for him to finish up, he'd been kind of involved and kind of connected, and then not real connected at times, and sometimes it's that way. Part of my career at Lipscomb, I was a day student. I was never more disconnected to the university than I was when I lived off campus and I just showed up for class. And so, but this guy, when it came time to graduate, he decided he didn't want to show up and actually graduate. He just wanted his piece of paper sent. How's a person like that going to be remembered? Because when that phone call comes in, I'm of the opinion that it takes, and I don't know what the statistics are, but it takes a lot more great things to happen, to be remembered that way. One negative thing can kind of wipe away a bunch of the good stuff. That's just human nature. That's how we are. We don't want to be that way, but we do, we remember the bad. And there are great opportunities. The church where you worship, how are they going to remember you? If you need a reference as you're working on a new job, are you going to be able to use and call on people at the church where you worship now and say, I need some references as are you building those kind of relationships as you network? Sometimes we have events. We'll have one in October. I think we're calling it the Spiritual Enrichment Seminar now. And you'll have choices to make because, Ed is going to have assigned a bunch of work, and Michael's going to have assigned work, and if you're taking the dean's class, you're going to have all this work hanging over you that you need to do, and all this is going to be going on, and so you're going to have a choice to make. I need to be working on my classwork, but there are all these visitors on campus, and all these great sessions are going on, and so am I going to kind of disappear, and am I going to work on my stuff, or am I going to show up and try to build some relationships and enrich myself? Because again, you may just casually meet some people, and when people are here, they love to meet students, and so they will remember you better than you remember them. And so later on, you're applying for jobs, and you send your resume out, and they see this resume that says, oh, there's Jim Collins' resume. I met him when I was on campus, and I liked him. And so I'm going to take his resume and I'm going to put it over here on the ones that we want to look more closely at that one. And that's when you're trying to find a job, what you want to do is find a way to make that group of people want to talk to you more. And so anything you can do to make them want to talk to you more is going to help you. When we have things here, the more involved and connected you are, it helps the school, but it helps you. It helps you. Now, there's about 10 minutes left, and again, I wanted Jim to say some things to you today because Jim has an extensive career in insurance and in selling, and when you're in that business, you depend on networks and you depend on relationships and all those kinds of things, and so I knew Jim would have some things that would be worth sharing today, and so I'm going to let him talk and then he'll close us out.
Phil, while Jim is getting up, let me say this. I have raised money that people are still supporting me from contacts I made during our workshops when I made friends with people. And so what you said works.
Amen. I appreciate Phil giving me the opportunity. I did spend 13 years in the insurance business where I was both an agent and a manager. And we had a statistic of the average person coming in. It's going to take 10 people to find one good person that would stick around. And you would know real quick about the person that was going to make it and going to be a success because they networked. If they didn't network, you would know months before they were gone that they weren't going to be there long. And I want to move on to the networking process that Phil's talked about, because when I decided to come to school, I wasn't sure where I was going to go to school, but I happened to think of somebody that I'd met in the congregation there in West Kentucky. and his name was Dennis Jones. And I called Dennis Jones, and I said, Dennis Jones, you don't know me, but you were here for 3 unusual days, and I'm thinking about going to school at a school of preaching, but I wanted to see what you thought about it. And he said, well, let me tell you a school that I'm involved with. And I said, well, okay. And so he talked about IDC. He said, you should come down, look at it, and he said, we've got a 2-year program. If that's all you want, just do it. He said, but if you decide you want to do 4 years and get your degree, you can do that as well. Oh, well, that makes sense. That's logical. That's reasonable. So I made the trip down here. Well, guess what? Here's where I came to school. And I'd made a contact in a congregation in Hopkinsville, Christian County area, and I didn't even know the lady. I couldn't remember the lady, but when I got ready to come to school down here, this congregation called me and said, by the way, you need to go and see a fellow by the name of James Smith at the Florence Boulevard Church of Christ. Bill knows him well. He was an elder there. And he said, because they're going to help you go to school. You don't know them, but they want to help you go to school. In fact, he and his wife put us up overnight when we came in that first night. Now, we were hot and sweaty, and I hadn't shaved, and we'd been moving all day, and our truck had broke down on us. And he told me later, after that first night experience, he thought, what in the world have I got myself into? But now, guess what? As I got to looking for my first job after I got here, somebody came to me and said, would you be interested in working in Rogersville, Alabama? It was Dennis Jones. So I went to work with Dennis Jones out there, kind of as a co-minister, because he already worked in the school. But during those 2 years that I was at Rogersville, making good connections, happened to run into Brother Smith one day, and he said, by the way, Jim, if you know somebody, this is the way you like to put it, if you know somebody that's planning on going to a stateside mission point in about 2 years, we'd like to talk to him. Now, I knew from his message to me that he had in mind me that if I was going, and guess what? We decided to go to a stateside mission work, and they took 75% of our needed support. Rogersville took a big portion of it. My home congregation took the rest. That's networking. And so I can't, as Philip has talked about, overemphasize the networking. One of the things that we try to do in the admissions office is not only recruit the student in, but we're constantly networking to try to find places for our students to go. And that means looking out to try to help you find a job if you're needing one. And as Philip talked about the workshops, I don't know in 12 years of my experience here if I've ever had a workshop that didn't have somebody come up to me and say, hey, by the way, we're going to be looking for a student, or we're looking for one now. Who would you recommend? I asked Charles Abernathy, he was here last week, asked him how many times he came and asked me to help him find a place. Now, I didn't send him to Chisholm Hills, but I sent him to about 2 or 3 different places, and some of them were good places. And as Philip said, there's nothing I'd rather do than say something good about you, because I just beam when I can say, let me tell you about Stephen Gill. Let me tell you about Ryan Leachman. Let me tell you about John Williams. Let me tell you about Ricky. Let me tell you about Patrick. Patrick, I think you've made contact with Bobby Lee already, right? Bobby Lee came up to me at the workshop at Freed, and when I found out Patrick was thinking about going somewhere, Rusty and I got together, and I said, you need to talk to Bobby Lee. Bobby was down here last week while we were playing. So you see, that's networking. I went to see a congregation that helped me when I was in school, and come to find out, guess who they're helping here in school? Ed Gallagher. Madisonville used to help me when I was in school here. And I was just excited to know that they're involved with Ed. It's networking. And so it's going to depend on you. And you never know that you're talking to that's going to be a contact for you. I've been in contact with a congregation, or had a number for a congregation 2 weeks ago, and they were, I had a call. I don't know, Wayne, I think, brought me a number back, or he told this elder to call me, and the elder called me, and we had a family over that way that was looking for a job, and the family called me, and they were coming in, and I told them about the job, and he called me the next day, and he said, Jim, the person you called me 15 minutes later. and we're excited about them coming to be with us and try out. Why? What was that? Networking. It wasn't just my networking, it was Wayne's networking, and it happens on probably a weekly basis. So important how you treat and respect those contacts that you see and meet. Don't ever burn a bridge if you can help it. Make sure that when you do come to workshop, look your best. When you go on an interview, look your best. And we shouldn't have to say that. And you don't even know during the week who's going to be on campus. And I was at CYC recruiting students, but guess what else I was doing? Networking. At Freed Harden, I was recruiting students, but guess what else I was doing? Networking. I got a pocket full of cards while I was up there from former graduates and talked to elders, and it's all about networking. And you don't know at this point probably 100% where you're going to go or what you're going to do. But you need to be networking now. And God knows, but you've got a choice in the whole process.